The psychopath in my house. There's a psychopath in my house. No, he didn't break in. He sleeps in the same room as me. It's not my brother's fault. This is just who he is. If it's anyone's fault, it's my parents. My mom left when I was 6 and my little brother was 4. She never wanted us at least that's what my dad said, because I don't remember her very well. Dad said she used to be a perfect student with big dreams. Then she got knocked up and had to drop out of college to take care of us. He reminds us all the time that it was our fault she left, and how happy he was before we were born. That's the nice version of what he said anyway. Lots of stuff about her being an ungrateful slut who will burn in hell, but I don't think of her that way. If I was married to someone like my dad, I would have run away too. My dad needed medicine to cope with her leaving. Every time he took it, he would be gone for a few days. It would be just me and my little brother in the house, and I took care of him the best I could. My dad wouldn't usually leave us with any money, but I got pretty good at hiding things under my dress at the grocery store. I thought things would change when I was 12 and found a paper bag with $1,000 in our backyard. I thought Mom had sent it, that she'd heard about how hard things were and mailed us some money. I could usually find food when I needed it badly enough, so I didn't want to waste it on things like that. It was my brother's 10th birthday coming up, and that seemed like a big deal. I hired a van and brought him and 7 kids from his class to spend the whole day at SeaWorld. It was so much fun I thought about never going back. My brother didn't want to run away though, and I couldn't leave him. Besides, the van driver was keeping an eye on us and said he had to bring us home or he might get fired. We should have run away though. The money hadn't come from my mom. She'd forgotten about us. That's when I found out my dad's medicine was meth and that he'd been selling some to his friends when he dropped the money by mistake. I tried to tell him that it was my fault, but since it got spent on my brother's birthday, he got the worst of it. My brother didn't walk again for 2 years after that. He needed even more help now that he was in a wheelchair. There were more bills that weren't being paid. The electricity, the gas, even the rent sometimes. I had to be out a lot trying to find money, sometimes for days at a time when I was staking out a house to steal from. I couldn't leave my brother alone too long though. My dad would just ignore him, and if I didn't check in at least twice a day, then I'd find my brother sitting in his own piss and shit. I think he could have made it to the toilet by himself if he really tried, but he just gave up caring about everything. There is one thing my brother started doing to pass the time, although this I wish he hadn't. I noticed his growing collection of small animal skulls for a while, but I assumed they were just plastic until I saw how he was catching them. I watched him put bird seed in a 2L soda bottle with the opening cut wider. Once a squirrel crawled in, he would pull a string which slid the bottle down to cover the opening with a piece of cardboard. It would struggle frantically to get out, but when it was near the opening, its own weight would hold the bottle into place against the board. I would have congratulated him on his contraption except for what happened next. He picked up the bottle, cardboard still, covering the opening, and slipped a couple razor blades inside. Then he shook the whole thing until it looked like the inside of a blender, the squirrel screaming the whole time. I took it away from him, but he just kept building little things like that. It wasn't just squirrels either. Mice, small birds, even a raccoon once. After he'd killed them, he'd bite the head straight off and then spit it into a bowl of water to clean the organic matter off the skull. Please stop. God didn't make those animals just so you could torture them, I said to him. Then why did he make it so much fun? It's not just animals anymore. I found a big cardboard box out on the sidewalk near the bus stop. Inside was a bag of M&Ms, a couple comic books, and his old Game Boy Color. There was a rope tied to little hooks inside the box which led toward my house. If someone were to pull that rope, the box would close and the whole thing would be dragged down the sidewalk. I don't think he'd be strong enough to pull anyone bigger than a 6-year-old. but the school bus stopped here. I ripped the box into pieces and ran to confront him. I found him sitting on his bed. He was out of the wheelchair now, waiting with a knife in his hands. "What the hell are you trying to do?" "Set a trap, Doc." "It's not going to work," I said. "Don't worry. It'll work, Doc." I destroyed it. "Why are you trying to trap some kid?" "I'm not. I'm trying to trap you, Doc." That's when I noticed that the TV was suspended with ropes above me. He cut the cord, and it landed right on top of my head. He must have counted on that knocking me out because he was already coming at me with the knife. I was dizzy, but I managed to scramble out of the way and slam the door in his face. After that, I was too scared to go back inside the house. I called Child Protective Services and reported the meth deals my dad was doing in the home. I didn't mention what my brother has been doing because I thought once he was out of here he'd have a chance at a fresh start. I didn't want his life to be over before it had even begun. We were both put into separate foster homes, and it's been 2 years since I've heard anything from him. That was until last night. My adoptive parents, wonderful Asian couple who couldn't have kids of their own, sat down with me at the kitchen table. They told me they had some good news. They were going to adopt my brother as well. I guess the family that took him in suffered an unfortunate accident. They didn't tell me what happened, but by the look they gave each other, it must have been gruesome. I hope he's changed. Telling people what he did will stop him from being adopted and ruin his life forever. I can't say anything until I've seen him again. If he hasn't though, well, that's why I'm writing this. If he hasn't changed, then at least someone will know what happened and have a shot at stopping it from happening again. How to start your own cult. Let me preface this by stating I am a firm atheist. There is no life after death, although I will go to great lengths extolling its beauty to my subjects. We do not grow older because the Reaper is always siphoning our life energy. I was not born from a dying star, and I am no prophet of the divine cosmic order. I am a nihilist. I do not believe in anything. And as much as I do not believe in the supernatural, I believe even less in mankind and their ability to govern their own lives. Do you really need proof of that? Fanatic mobs begging for their religious oppression to be protected by the government. Junkies in the streets surrendering their will to anything they can boil into their veins. A narcissistic idiot elected president of the United States. You get the idea. The church states, the cartels, the two-faced corporations. None of them will hesitate to manipulate the population for their own selfish purposes. The vast majority of people will always be susceptible to being manipulated because it is so much safer and easier to be told what to think than to think for yourself. My reasoning dictates: 1. People will always be susceptible to manipulation. If you aren't manipulating them, then someone else will. 2. The manipulator will always profit at the expense of the people. That is the purpose for their influence. 3. The only way to protect people from a selfish manipulator is to become a benevolent manipulator yourself. For these reasons, in my senior year of college, I decided to start my own cult. Step 1. Identify your targets. People will not run to you unless they are already running away from something else. Now, where could I find the most fearful students? I formed 3 support clubs and put up flyers around campus. 1 for the socially anxious, 1 for those needing financial assistance, and a 3rd for victims of sexual assault. Step 2. Amplify their fear. Ever wonder why priests scream about hell while politicians rant about terrorists and economic collapse? There is nothing like fear to get someone's attention and follow you for relief. To the socially anxious, I forced them to give speeches. I asked them embarrassing questions, put them in awkward situations, and generally ridiculed them, all in the guise of helping them gain confidence. To the financially stressed, I gave lectures about how student loans haunt people for the rest of their life. I told them how the job market is oversaturated with college degrees and how slim their chance of employment was. I told horror stories about homeless drug addicts who graduated college but couldn't make anything of their lives. The sexual assault group was the most fun for me. No, I didn't rape them. I needed them all to trust me. I did, however, convince them that I was the only one looking out for them, that there was a rapist in every party and down every dark alley. Step 3. Offer a solution. 3 months into the semester, I had finished establishing sufficient trust. That's when I let them in on a little secret. The reason why I am not afraid. Wouldn't it be great if there was a safe place to go where no one would make you feel bad about being socially inept? A band of brothers who helped each other find jobs, share rooms, and reach financial success? Sisters who would hold your hand and keep you safe from all the predatory monsters in the world? I had enough people now that I was able to register my flock as a co-ed professional fraternity. I did some fundraising with the groups and managed to raise enough money to renovate an abandoned motel into my headquarters. Now that I had them all together, the fun could really begin. Step 4. Make yourself special. It's not enough for your people to need your insight. They need to need you. Now it was time to explain what made me unique. Don't force it down their throats. People don't want to be part of an organization that needs them. They want to be part of something exclusive, something that recognizes how special they know they are inside. I began by offering private counseling sessions to everyone having difficulty. To each of them, I confessed the truth about why I was helping them. You see, I wasn't human at all. I was an alien who was born in the Andromeda galaxy. My people are empaths, allowing us to sense the suffering of other sentient beings. I felt how troubled Earth was, and I came here to save humanity from themselves. They were all skeptical at first, but here's what really convinced them. I told each person in confidence that the rest of the fraternity was already indoctrinated. No one wants to be the only one left out, especially when they finally found a home which unequivocally accepts and shelters them. Step 5. Make them special. Each new member makes it that much easier to add the next, because it adds credibility and makes people more afraid of being left out. Adding the first few is the hardest part, so here is what I did. The first person I convinced was a scared freshman girl who was raped during a house party. She was ready to give anything just to feel safe. I gave her the chance to witness the ceremony and didn't force her to commit to anything. I laid rows of candles in the basement and lined the walls with mannequins. I concealed the mannequins with thick robes, so it would appear as though most of the fraternity was already present. I used a surround sound system and a layered chanting soundtrack to make it seem like everyone was participating. By the time I was through with the ceremony, she was so afraid of being left out that she swore the oath of loyalty right on the spot. Step 6. Make it impossible to leave. This is the final, and I would argue most important step. There is nothing as toxic to an organization as having a previous member leave and talk about it. Once I had 10 members who had undergone the ceremony, I organized them into 2 groups of 5. I gave them innocent tasks to prove their loyalty. Each one would be slightly more difficult than the last, which is important for keeping them invested. The final task, to allow them full membership and protection, was very simple. 4 of them must team up and kill the 5th member of the group. For each group, I chose the least loyal, most suspicious member to be killed. I told the rest that the 5th member was a traitor, that he raped one of the other members, that he was going to single-handedly destroy all we had worked to build together. They would never do it alone, but when the rest of their group was going along with it, they lost the power to think for themselves. Both groups did as they were told. It was a ritualistic sacrifice. The extra man would be tied down to a stone table. I had already drugged him, minimizing his resistance. I used his slurred speech as proof that he was possessed by an evil cosmic spirit which sought to destroy us all. I made sure each of the 4 loyal group members thrust the knife into his body at least once. After that, their conscience would bind them to me forever. If they stayed, their minds told them they were a hero. If they left, they were a murderer. Which do you think they would?
Rather be? One full semester later, I have indoctrinated 54 members so far. There have been 10 deaths, soon to be an 11th. I'm not writing this as a confession. I don't expect you'll be able to find me. I'm writing this as an offer. My cult is growing, and there are different chapters springing up all around the country. We have been helpless pawns for too long, but we are learning how to play the game by their rules. When you are ready to take power into your own hands, I hope you will join me and change the world. 3. Go to sleep. For wake up. I've done it. 3 years of being single, and I've finally gotten a girlfriend. Yes, she is human. No, she is not blind. No, she is not a body pillow. These are the kinds of questions my best friend Mike kept asking me. I was so excited that I wasn't even bothered. Besides, I knew he was just jealous because he'd never even been with a girl before. He's always been the bigger nerd between the two of us, like learning Elvish from Tolkien's books and chanting spells in our D&D games, hardcore nerd stuff. Neither of us are the type of guy that girls tend to hang around though. Mike and I live together. We're both video game streamers, Hearthstone and Dota 2, and we make a living off advertising and tournament winnings. I met Natasha through a Twitch chat room and she happened to live close by. Since the first day we met, we've practically been joined at the hip. We eat every meal together, shower together, even stream together. I don't remember ever being this happy. The only problem is, Mike has decided to make this all about him. He started gaining even more weight, he never goes outside, and all he does is bitch about how I never hang out with him anymore. Natasha decided the solution was for the 3 of us to go camping together in Yellowstone National Park. Mike would get some exercise, I'd get to hang out with him, and most importantly, Natasha and I wouldn't have to spend any time apart. I regret everything though. Why does everything in nature have to be so damn itchy? It turns out Natasha has a severe misunderstanding about how trails work. She must be a Skyrim player because she thinks there is only one right way up a mountain, and that's straight up the rock cliffs. If we weren't still at that phase of dating where everything becomes an opportunity to impress each other, I would have given up and gone home. I have no idea how Mike made it, but we all decided the day was over by about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. The view was incredible. No, I'm not just talking about Natasha in her short shorts. She found a practically inaccessible rock ledge overlooking most of the park and single-handedly hauled all our camping gear up there while Mike and I lay panting on the ground. Campfire, esmores, a full blanket of stars. It was a great night. Natasha and Mike bonded over Magic the Gathering cards, which I can't believe he packed instead of a lantern, and he finally agreed to start working out and taking better care of himself so he could find a girl too. As the campfire burned down to embers, we started telling ghost stories. I told one about a man-eating wendigo. Natasha knew a twisted story about a priest who crucified people, and Mike, I don't know where Mike stole his story from, but he claimed to have made it up on the spot. I think he was trying to impress Natasha too, but I didn't get jealous. He said it in a sing-song, rhyming voice which was super creepy, and I made him write it down afterward. It went like this. I had a dream one fateful night, when day had made its run, when waking world had fled from sight, and silent moon eclipses sun. Into fitful slumber slipped, losing command of my thoughts. Nightmares around me gripped, the familiar had come to naught. I forgot what I've been taught about what cannot cause me harm. My fears abound, and safety sought. I screamed to waken in alarm, only to find I've fallen deeper, down this darkened pit of shade. No sound escapes from silent sleeper, nor outward sign of my dismay. I saw a monster rear its head, somewhere inside of mine. On my dear memories it fed, the beast who devours time. Scything talons raking down, gaping jaws of a giant spider. I was marked as I was found, as the one outsider. Until all I could recall of life was that I had once loved. Until that too was torn in strife, an arm severed from the glove. There upon the edge of breaking, Inside of me, a guide would lead. She was the love I'd be forsaking. When I opened my eyes from sleep, she took my hand and together ran from the monster in my mind. We got so far that soon began what I never thought to find. We lived a day, a season, then year, an entire lifetime in my head, happy as he who has forgotten fear of the monster I had dread, until finally it rose from quiet when we thought ourselves alone. We had lived lives in spited, but our life together was on loan. The monster had us caught, trapped and helpless in a corner. With no escape, I stood and fought, rather die than be a mourner, rather lose oneself completely than forget what I had sworn. Death before me, but I would beat he who would dare to touch her form. I ripped the air with my 2 hands, but as the creature was not real, no blows upon the beast did land, though its talons I could feel. Blooded, broken, and abused, I awaited morning's light to heal and save me from this awful ruse that my fortune had me sealed. She knelt above me, my lovely queen, and besought me waken from this dream. But what fate would befall her here? Would with the morning she disappear? She bore the monster and its fury, begging only that I woke, bidding me go, though not to hurry, lest this the last time that we spoke. Sweat-soaked, body shakes, I can't remember why I was sad. Throat chalked, fully awake. Memories flood of the dream I had. Blood trickled down my length, and I thanked each crimson bead. They gave hope and lent me strength, that perhaps she too was freed. And there my bride lay beside me. From my dream she was released. Wearied from dreaming was she, who in the waking world found peace. I woke up to a high-pitched scream in the middle of the night. What the shit? Did a bear get into our camp? I thought we'd be safe from any of the larger wildlife because of the rock ledge. Or maybe it was a mountain lion. I was on my feet. Natasha was already unzipping our tent. Wait, it could be dangerous. Then we've got to help Mike Dot. I couldn't fault her reasoning. I just wish she had been a little more selfish. I grabbed my cell phone to use as a flashlight and followed her outside.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Sorry, I screamed. Mike was in his boxers, standing outside his tent. You scream like a girl. What happened? I asked. He pointed inside his tent and drew the flap back. Natasha. And I peered inside with him. There was a girl, or maybe a goddess, mid-20s long, auburn hair, flawless skin, but naked, lying beside Mike's
empty sleeping bag.
I turned away for a moment, but looked again as soon as I noticed Natasha wasn't averting her eyes. "Who the hell are you?" Natasha asked. The girl smiled, making no effort to cover herself. She sat upright and began smoothing out her hair. Shy had the dream, the same dream from that story I found. Mike said. I knew you didn't make that shit up, I said. Yeah, whatever, Mike replied. But I was dreaming about her, and the beast was there. And what's your name? Where did you come from? Natasha asked. The girl stretched luxuriously, still smiling. She stood up and wrapped her arms around Mike, peering at us from over his shoulder. Where did you find that story? I asked Mike. He was frozen, stiff with a mix of terror and rapture. Some book. Doesn't matter, Dot. It does matter if it's real, I said. I don't like it, Natasha said. Either tell us who you are, or get out of here, Dot. I know. Mike stepped protectively in front of her. She's lost. Without any food, or clothes, or anything. We can't just leave her in the wilderness, Dot. You're just saying that because you think you're going to get some. Dot, I don't know why I was fighting it. I shouldn't be jealous. I had Natasha, but this just wasn't fair. I don't care, Mike said. I'm going to take her back with us and bring her to a hospital in the morning. Maybe she had concussion or something, Dot. Until the morning? Natasha asked, crossing her arms. The girl pulled away from Mike and settled into his sleeping bag. Mike smiled sheepishly. Well, she seems comfortable here, so. You're an idiot. Natasha rolled her eyes and walked out. Over her shoulder, she added, but if the girl is real, then Wouldn't be surprised if the beast was 2. Mike gave me a thumbs up. I laughed, closing the tent behind me. That was the last time I saw Mike alive. When we checked on him in the morning, his rib cage was flayed open. His heart was missing, but there was still some scraps of sinew and part of his aorta lying in a pool of blood beside the bag. The girl was gone. I threw up in the bushes. Natasha just stared at the grisly scene. "We're going home," she said, turning sharply away. "I'll start packing." "I know," she said. "Let's just go. We can't leave Mike like this. It's his own damn fault." Now the girl could be anywhere, so let's go now. Natasha was already halfway down the rocky wall, but I wasn't going to run through the forest naked. I opened my tent to grab some pants, but the girl was sitting in my tent. Her naked body was covered in blood, and when she smiled, more blood squirted out from between her teeth. "Hurry up," Natasha yelled from outside. "I swear to God I'll leave without you. I was about to turn and run when the bloody girl finally spoke. "Help me. I help you? After what you did to..." It wasn't me." Her smile was gone now, and she looked on, the verge of tears. It was the beast. He's free too. If she was telling the truth, then I couldn't just leave her here. If she wasn't, there was another scream outside. Natasha leapt from the tent and ran to the place she was climbing down. Her crumbled body was lying on the ground. She must have slipped while climbing. No. There was a dark shape on top of her, like a wolf with impossibly long limbs and an elongated mouth. Natasha, but I was helpless to get to her in time. One bite was enough to snap the ribcage open. I couldn't watch what was going to happen next. I turned around, and the girl was gone. I ran farther and faster than I ever have in my life. There were a few times when I heard something bounding through the underbrush to my side, but I didn't look. Kept running even when my lungs felt like they were about to explode, and the stitch in my side threatened to tear me in half. I don't know whether the girl and the beast were the same, simply 2 halves of the same nightmare. I don't know if it's still out there, or whether it only comes when that story is read aloud. I'm going to try and find the book where Mike found the story and destroy it. Although I have to admit, I'm a little curious what else is written in those pages. She is still with me. Well, of course you're depressed. You never leave the house. Your life isn't over just because hers is. I'm sorry, but it's true. Don't give up hope. You're going to meet someone else and be just as happy as you ever were. Just as happy. I'm tired of hearing it. What I'm going through, what I'm feeling. It's nobody's business but my own. I don't even know how to begin opening up to anyone who isn't Natalie. 10 years of feeling her warmth pressed against me when I wake. And years of whispering to each other in the dark. 10 years of making plans which will never be fulfilled. 9 months of drinking until I pass out on the couch with the TV on. I haven't been able to sleep in the bed we shared since breast cancer stole my wife from me. Hell, I've barely been able to sleep at all, and by the way people talk to me, I know. They can tell. They're right, of course, but that only makes it harder. Knowing they're right and still being unable to do anything about it is such a frustrating feeling, like realizing the right answer after you've already turned in your test. But I'm working through the grief in my own way. It has been a confusing time for me, but I've started keeping this journal to help me process my thoughts. While I will never forget her, in time I will learn to move on. I'm meeting someone for dinner tonight. I won't call it a date. It probably is, but I don't want to put my mind in that place yet. Sarah, the daughter of an older client, is in town and I've promised to entertain her for the evening. Guess she has some self-esteem issues, and I'm supposed to make her feel better about herself. We've chatted a few times and she's laughed at some of the things I said, even though I know they weren't funny. I would have even called her beautiful at a time when I still looked at women that way. Well, here goes nothing. Why the fuck didn't I listen to myself? I knew it was too soon. I felt tense the moment I sat down with her. I should have just left then. Everything was going fine though, more than fine. She was fantastic. But then she started humming that damn My Heart Will Go On song. The one song stuck in her head just had to be the first song Natalie and I danced to at our wedding. What are the chances? I feel like an idiot for jumping up and racing to the bathroom. I don't know how long I stayed in there, but I was half hoping she would be gone when I came out. To her credit, Sarah just laughed it off and acted like nothing happened. She did ask one strange thing though. She asked what Natalie would have thought about her. What an awkward silence that was. All I could manage was my wife would have been happy to see me having a good time, but that was a lie, of course. Couldn't exactly tell her that Natalie was the jealous type. If she knew I was out on a date now, then 6 feet of dirt wouldn't be enough to stop her. Sarah is so sweet to still worry about that. Even with Natalie gone, we're getting drinks again. She was even the one to invite me. I can't believe it. Natalie is the only one to ever chase me before. I've heard girls sometimes find men who are suffering to be the most attractive. Our indifference gives them a challenge. Our damage gives them something to fix. I'm honestly excited about it. Even if nothing else happens, this will be good for me. She actually reminds me of Natalie a lot. The way she cups my hand in hers when she leans in to talk. And then there's the way she bites her lip when she's holding back a smile. Even wears the same kind of long dress with the high belt my wife used to wear, although she has the type of body which would do well in something more revealing. Now that I think about it, Sarah and Natalie really have a lot in common. You don't think that? No, it's impossible. Natalie is gone. I wanted to move on, right? And that's never going to happen by entertaining such ridiculous thoughts. Okay, this is getting weird though. Sarah won't stop mentioning Natalie. She spent the whole evening asking about how we met and what I liked about her and how we spent our time together. It was hard enough talking about my dead wife on a date, but then Sarah would stare at me as though she was analyzing my every answer. How am I supposed to forget Natalie like this? No, not forget. Didn't he mean forget? I'll never forget. But I think I want to. Is that so wrong? If thinking about her brings me nothing but sadness, is it so wrong to want to be happy? Natalie would have thought so. Promised I would never love anyone like I loved her. Promised she could never be replaced. Could she really still be holding me to that promise? What if Sarah was only a test? What if Natalie is still watching me, waiting for me to fail? I need to go for a walk. Natalie is coming over to my place tonight. Natalie, the girl won't stop calling me. I'm getting text messages every 10 minutes. Whatever I turn the conversation to, she always redirects it back to my dead wife. Natalie is still with me. I know it. She doesn't want me to move on. When she comes over tonight, I'm going to ask her straight out. If she says she's Sarah, if she says she isn't my wife, I'll leave it at that. But if she admits her spirit is still here, I don't know. I'll do whatever I can to help her find peace. Natalie has traveled to the other side. I'm finally free. For the first time since her death, her presence is finally gone. I didn't have the courage to ask the girl right away. Could tell she was reserved too. So we both had a couple of drinks. I knew I needed to ask, but it still felt so awkward and wrong, so I just kept drinking. Finally, I was able to push the words out. Are you really Sarah? Or are you Natalie's spirit? And I'm everything she was, she said, and she kissed me. Closed my eyes, and I could taste Natalie's lips. I ran my fingers through Natalie's hair and felt my wife's hands on my chest. It was so good to hold her again, even if this was the last time. It was so good to feel her skin beneath my hands. It was so good to choke the life out of her, sending her spirit back to rest. I hope she stays gone. This is the third time I've had to send Natalie back to the other side. I'm working through my grief in my own way though, and once Natalie has finally let go of me, I think I'll be able to let go of her too. As long as I have a body beside me, I think I can finally sleep in my bed again tonight. Sometimes a song is just a song. Sometimes a smile is just a smile. Some people are meant to be alone. Dead man floating. I found the first floater when I was 7 years old. It had washed up on the shore about 100 yards from my family's summer house. It still looked mostly human, a bit swollen and decomposed, but whole enough for me to immediately recognize what it was. Even as a kid, I was never very squeamish. I used to watch my father skin the deer he caught on his hunting trips, and I would clean my own fish whenever I reeled one in from the salty lake. Finding a human body was the best thing that could have happened to me that summer. I thought about telling my parents, but there's no way they would let me play with it. Heck, they might even ban me from going down to the water at all, a thought which my 7-year-old brain equated to nuclear holocaust, an asteroid destroying the Earth, or other disasters of similar magnitude. So I did what any clear-thinking 7-year-old would do. Gathered up all the other kids I knew and charged them $5 each to poke it with a stick. The salt water preserved it well enough for us to stomach the smell, but poking it would release some of the bloated gas still trapped in the carcass. I told them they could have their money back if they could lick it without throwing up. No one got their money back. I made $60 before one of the little snitches told his mother, and she called the police. Next summer when I came back, the first thing I did was race back to the same spot. Sure enough, there had been 2 more bodies to wash up over the winter. These must have been sitting out in the sun for a while though, because I couldn't even get close to them. My father had followed me that time, and I wasn't allowed to have any fun. The police said these bodies must be new, since they would have been completely rotten if they had been down there for a year. Over the next 10 years, there had been another 3 bodies found beside the lake. Each was slightly more decomposed than the last, but the police still insisted they had to be separate incidents because they were all still too fresh. None of them could be identified, and as they didn't fit any missing persons within the entire state, the police had no leads to discover who was dumping the bodies. They had given up, but I was never able to put the mystery out of my mind. I had my own theory. I decided those people didn't just die in the lake, they lived in it too. I thought that when they die, they float to the surface just like when humans die, they're buried in the ground. In retrospect, the idea didn't really make sense, but it had started forming when I was so young that I refused to let go until the mystery had been resolved. When I was in college, I became scuba certified for the sole purpose of finding where those bodies were coming from. Rented my own equipment and went back to that lake the summer of my freshman year. The water was incredibly buoyant from all the salt, and it took almost 20 pounds of weights before I would finally sink to the floor. It was slow progress working my way through the lake, 6 separate dives before I found what I didn't even know I was looking for, a sunken plane. I don't know how long it had been down here, but it looked rusted as shit. One of the doors had completely rusted off, and I was able to enter and look around. There were 2 more bodies inside, no more than skeletons. Now, the inside of the plane was compartmentalized, almost like it was broken into sealed jail cells. The locks on some of the cells had long since rusted open, and I'm guessing these are where the floaters came from. They were in their own pressurized air chambers. Then that explains how they were preserved for so long. As the plane deteriorated, they must have broken free and floated to the surface one by one. My most important discovery was the black box, although it was painted bright orange, so it's a pretty stupid name. Brought it back with me and swam to the surface to research my findings. The plane was a Douglas C-47, which was used for military transport during World War II. They were still being used for decades afterward, though. Some remained operational even up to 2012, so I still don't know how long it's been there. The flight data recorder had completely deteriorated, but the cockpit voice recorder still had some salvageable tape. Most of it was fuzzy or jumpy, but here's what I have. 164, Roger. Something I couldn't make out. Unable to make out your last message. Please repeat. It's out. Repeat. One of them has gotten out. Has the cockpit been compromised? Negative. Cell block is couldn't hear. Please repeat, Captain. Repeat. Cell block is compromised. It's letting the others out. Fucking Christ. Remain calm, Captain. Can you neutralize the test subject? Not without compromising cockpit. How far am I from the landing? Field. Something unintelligible. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? Something unintelligible. Not granted permission land. Well then, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Something, mission terminated. Thank you for your service, Captain. My service ain't over until I bring this bird down. You reordered to force collision. Test subjects must not escape. Like hell I am. I am bringing her down into some water now. Request rescue operations. Mission terminated. Rescue operation denied. After that, all I could hear was engine sounds. It went on for about 5 minutes, and I was about to stop listening when I heard something like a snarling tiger. I guess I haven't changed that much since I was a kid because I still don't want to bring this into the police. I've got another dive plan next week, and I'm going to try to break open the remaining cell blocks to get a look inside. I'll admit I was pretty hesitant about making my second dive. Just to be safe, I decided not to go on this one alone. 2 nights ago, I reconnected with Antoine, one of the boys who found some of the original floaters with me. He still remembered trying to lick the body to get his $5 back, and we laughed about it. I guess that sort of thing only happens once in your life. I showed him the audio recordings I pulled from the black box and talked him into joining me. He didn't have dive equipment, but I knew I'd feel better with him in the boat. I noticed feeling anything strange since you licked it? I asked him while we were rowing out to the middle of the lake. What kind of strange? You mean besides puking my guts? Ow, Schwartz. New birthmark in the shape of a pentagram. Sudden urge to kill people. You know, something like that. Not that I can think of, he admitted, except for my ability to talk to animals. What? Seriously? Yeah. He smirked. They just don't talk back. Keep pulling your weight or the boat is gonna start turning in circles. Reading too many horror stories online must have made me paranoid. I don't know what I was so afraid of in the first place. The visibility was good underwater, and I didn't even see any fish besides a host of little black water slugs scootering around. Instead of weights, this time I just used a crowbar to sink me down to the plane. The doors were so rusted they were starting to unfasten on their own, so it was no problem breaking the lock off. I was tense, but I remembered to force myself to keep breathing evenly through the regulator. Holding my breath underwater could easily result in an arterial gas embolism. Then I'd be the next floater they found washed up on the beach. Even without the lock, the room was still pressure sealed with an air pocket inside. I tried leveraging the crowbar, but I still couldn't pry the door open against the weight of all that water. Managed to hammer on the door with the metal bar until a leak appeared. The wider I forced the hole, the more water flowed through to equalize the pressure. Once it was full, it should swing open without a problem. I finally worked the crowbar all the way through the door, but this time it got stuck. That's weird because the water was flowing freely around it, so there should be plenty of space to pull it back. It was almost as if something were holding it from the other side. That was a thought I could have done without. I freaked and dropped the crowbar, but without its weight, I began to immediately float back towards the surface. I held onto the door frame to keep myself from slipping upwards, but it was almost impossible to swim further down against my buoyancy. Luckily, I didn't have to. The cell finished flooding and the door began opening on its own. Suddenly, I was face to face with a dead body. Its skin had long since begun to rot away, especially around its eyes and mouth where there were just gaping holes remaining. My crowbar had stuck straight into its side where it had gotten stuck. I was about to pull myself down toward it along the door frame when I noticed the crowbar was sliding back out.
No.
Not sliding. The body's hands were wrapped around the bar. They were pulling the crowbar out of its side. Had I jolted upward too quickly when I let go of the bar? Maybe I already suffered a stroke from the gas embolism. Without noticing, the body lurched toward me. Slow, even breaths. Dante, stop. Breathing. Easier said than done with a dead body clambering up. Toward you. It was fast too, driven with a purpose. Legs and arms with openly rotten sinews moved effortlessly through the water like a practice swimmer. I pushed my way out of the plane, but the body was right behind me. It dropped the crowbar and began ascending smoothly through the water toward me. It was just as fast as me, even though I had fins. Shit. I kicked hard, and without any weight I was raising way too swiftly. I couldn't stop myself. I felt the air expanding in my lungs so rapidly it felt like they would burst. I was practically screaming underwater, trying to get as much air out as I could. Once I hit the surface, the scream finally became audible, although it was little more than a wheezing gasp at that point. The boat? Where was the boat? Antoine, get your ass over here. He was leaning over the boat and peering down into the water, about 50 yards away. Fuck. I looked down and saw the shadow of the body swiftly ascending toward me. I swam hard toward the boat. Antoine wasn't reacting. There's no way he didn't hear me. Why the hell didn't he start rowing? He was just staring into the depth, his face about an inch from the water. Antoine, I swear to God. But my lungs felt like they were on fire. I couldn't take a full breath yet. All the air I had was going into keeping my legs kicking. The shadow was right underneath me now, 10 feet from the boat. I ducked my head underwater and paddled as hard as I could. Too slow. The body was intercepting me. It was going to block my route. About 5 feet away from safety, it surfaced, directly between me and the boat. But it wasn't an explosive surface like something swimming upward. It just floated there, face down in the water, looking as dead as I felt. I had to push the body out of the way to get to the boat. I kept expecting a hand to grab my ankle and pull me back down, but there was nothing. I climbed into the boat and fell on my back panting. My mask was cloudy, so I ripped it off. As soon as I could kneel again, I practically shoved Antoine straight into the water. What the hell is wrong with you? The push pressed him against the side of the boat. He tensed and relaxed, but didn't turn away from the water. It was like trying to wake someone from a deep sleep. He was just vacantly staring at the floating body now. The body was moving again, though. Its ear was anyway. Not a natural movement anymore. Not like the body was moving on its own. It was like there was something inside, trying to crawl out. As I watched, one of the black slugs pushed its way out of the ear, got stuck part way and had to gnaw its way through the rest of the cartilage with razor-sharp teeth like a leech. As it struggled out, the whole corpse shook like it was having a seizure. It looks like you had it wrong, Antoine said in a sleepy voice. Did he just wake up? There's no way he could have slept through that. His face was still down next to the water, though, and I couldn't get a clear look at him. What do you mean? The floaters we found weren't the test subjects, he replied, finally pulling away from the water. His body was shivering slightly, somewhere between freezing to death and full body ecstasy. The tail end of a black slug had just finished slipping into his ear. Of course they were. Why else would they be in the cells? I asked. By the time the words were out of my mouth, I had already realized it. The bodies weren't the test subjects. The bodies were hosts to the test subjects, and they had already been free in the water since all those years ago when the first floater broke free. I loved her in the winter. I can take care of myself. I'm not crazy, you know. Why does everyone think I'm crazy? No one thinks you're crazy, Dad. Dementia is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a common medical condition with people your age. You wouldn't have locked me up in here if you didn't think I was crazy. When is Elise going to pick me up? It's the same conversation every time I visited Dad in the Forest Glen retirement home. At first, he just started forgetting What things were named? Pepsi became bubble juice and he'd call his dog a schwoofer. We all thought it was hilarious until he started forgetting who we were too. He thought I looked familiar, but the helpless frustration on his face as he tried to remember how he knew me was excruciating. My childhood, all our time together, my whole life was just being erased. After his wife, my mom, Elise died, Dad completely fell apart. It was like she was his only reason to keep trying at all. He used to passionately assemble model planes and ships, but he smashed them all and wouldn't touch them again. He wouldn't even read or watch TV, preferring to just sit alone and stare at the wall. He stopped taking care of himself and became belligerent when someone tried to help him. Just bury me already. If I'm such a burden, he'd say. My wife and I would laugh it off, but we all knew he wasn't joking. He was a burden. He needed help going to the bathroom and showering and getting dressed, and as much as I told myself that sending him to the home was for his own good, I was relieved when he was gone. That's why I was so worried when I got a call from the retirement home 2 weeks ago. They said Dad was missing. Wasn't the first time he tried to get out, but the nurses always stopped him before he made it past the door. He could barely lift his foot high enough to put a slipper on, but this time he somehow managed to climb straight out the window. If he was lost out there, he wouldn't know how to get back. He probably wouldn't even remember who he was. That would have been bad enough, but the note he left behind made me even more anxious. I'm going to be with Elise, and I'm not coming back. Goodbye, everyone. Dad was going to kill himself tonight. I knew it. Frantically drove up and down the streets around the home, shouting his name, wondering if he'd recognize it or even respond if he did. I checked every puddle he could have drowned in, every bridge he could have jumped from, everything I could think of. Wife was visiting her relatives out of town for the week, but she stayed on the phone with me the whole time to keep me calm. Didn't work. But didn't he forget Elise even died? She asked. He's probably not trying to kill himself. He just wants to find her. I checked back at the house, nothing. I might as well stop by the graveyard where Elise was buried too. It didn't make much sense if he still thought she was alive, but I was desperate. It was about 3 in the morning when I saw his shriveled form hunched over her headstone. Dad, are you okay? I approached cautiously, terrified that I was too late. He didn't stir as I drew up behind him. Did he just realize that she was dead? Had he spent the last of his strength coming here to say goodbye? He didn't turn from the grave when he finally spoke. Remember his words as clearly as the cold night air. I met her in the spring. She wakes me from my deathly slumber. Wedding bells in joyous ring. Summer toil could not encumber one shared soul as ours so blessed, and through autumn's fiery air. Am I to love her any less? Now winter rips her branches bare? Or softly shall I sit and mourn all the dark hours of the night, until once more is spring reborn, and her eyes refill with light? Did he really believe she was coming back? Or was this his way of understanding? I sat down next to him and wrapped my coat around his frail shoulders. His eyes sparkled in the pale moonlight, but not from grief. I don't remember ever seeing him look so happy. But it's already spring, a voice said. My mother's voice. I was watching my dad and didn't notice until she was standing directly before us. Or maybe she had just appeared there, I don't know. But she wasn't old anymore. She looked how I remember her when I was a child. She embraced my father, and before my eyes, he shed his years as lightly as his tears. Dad was growing taller. My coat, which draped around his shoulders, swelled like a balloon as his muscles became firm. The bulging veins in his hands receded as he held my mother, and his skin pulled taut as the deep network of wrinkles which mapped out his life vanished. They both looked younger than I did now. Mother winked at me from over Dad's shoulder. She held a finger to her lips and said, It'll be our little secret, okay? Let's all go home. My wife called 12 times over the next week. I just told Her everything was fine, and we'd talk about it when she got back.
It was better than fine, though. I felt like I was living.
Inside a dream. I woke every morning to my mom's scrambled eggs and French toast. I wanted to call in sick from work and spend every minute with them, but she insisted I still go and threatened to drive me there herself. Every night I'd return to watch Dad, rebuilding his models, swearing good-naturedly when he couldn't find a piece. Then we'd all eat dinner as a family and watch a movie together, Dad making sarcastic comments throughout, and Mom giggling like a schoolgirl with a crush. I've never seen them so happy. I've never remembered being so happy. They had aged so slowly over the years, and I had pulled away from them so gradually that I never really dwelt on how close we once were. It was just like being a kid again. After a disagreement at work, someone even shot back that I smelled funny. Who since the 3rd grade has ever used an argument like that? I couldn't wait for my wife to get home. I'd kept my parents a secret from everyone, and I was so pleased with myself for resisting the urge to tell her. Sure, they couldn't live with me forever, but just seeing the look on my wife's face when she walked in would be priceless. When I picked her up from the airport, she seemed a little withdrawn. I tried to kiss her, but she pulled away. Have you been okay alone? You've been taking care of yourself, right? I just laughed. She seemed worried about me. Maybe she was tired from traveling. Maybe her relatives stressed her out, but as soon as I showed her what had happened, she would forget all about it. "Welcome home, dear," my mother said when I opened the door. And isn't she darling? How was the trip?" my father asked. I just watched my wife's face, unable to contain my gigantic grin. She was shocked, all right. Her mouth was just hanging open. Then she coughed and covered her nose. Well, what do you think?" I asked her. "I think I'm going to be sick," she said, and she was right there on the entry mat. The smell of her vomit was like some kind of trigger. Suddenly the whole house smelled absolutely rancid. "Do you smell that, Mom?" "What is it?" "Mom." What was left of her decaying body was propped up on the sofa. Dad, bloated from gas and covered with a yellow-green mold, was sitting in his armchair. Couldn't understand what happened. My wife ran out and called the police. They took away the bodies and took me in for a psych evaluation. The next few days were a blur, but eventually I was released with the diagnosis of a hallucination stemming from PTSD. They said my father had died the night he escaped after catching pneumonia in the night air. They said my mother had been dug up and that the trunk of my car contained a dirty shovel. I don't believe them, though. I didn't even own a shovel. Think they were just trying to cover up for something they couldn't explain. I don't get what the big deal was anyway, even if they were gone. So what if I did want to keep them? Should I love them any less in the winter? History written in scars. No, not a cut. Not a bruise from sleepwalking or a bang where I drunkenly hurt myself without remembering. I'm talking jagged, gnarly, vicious scars which looked like they've healed years ago. The first one to appear was an inch-long incision on my stomach, almost like a surgical wound. I live in college with a roommate, Robert, but he didn't remember anything happening. Then I called my parents and asked them if I'd ever had a surgery before, but the only procedure I'd undergone was having my wisdom teeth removed, a dead end, unless they thought the stomach was a shortcut to the mouth. I figured that I just hadn't noticed it before, or perhaps something traumatic happened and I completely blocked out the memory, but I didn't worry about it. Played basketball in high school and have had my fair share of being knocked around, so it must have been from something then. Those were the glory days, man. I play on my collegiate intramural team now, but it's just not the same. I was a school hero back then, but life goes on. You know, all the victories and mistakes I made on and off the court, they're all ancient history. The next morning I woke with a long scar along my forearm. It must have been deep too, and the skin holding it together was stretched like I've grown since it closed. I ran my finger over it, but it didn't even hurt. The skin was slightly raised and hard, but otherwise I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't looking right at it. I thought about going to the doctor, but it looked so old that he'd probably just say I forgot what caused it. I tried not to think about the scars for the rest of the day, although my buddy Chase noticed it during our practice that evening. I didn't want to sound like an idiot, so I made up a story about this time I fought off a mugger to protect my girlfriend and got a swipe from his switchblade. Yeah, I think I remember you mentioning something about that, bro, he said. Bitch, please. I doubt that, since I just made the story up on the spot. It wasn't interfering with my game though, and I was so tired afterward that I just hit the showers and went straight to bed. I completely forgot about it until I was falling asleep, and then it was all I could think about. What if something was attacking me in the night? But no, that was ridiculous. But what if something was attacking a younger version of myself in the night? Even stupider. I eventually convinced myself that I was making a big deal out of nothing and fell asleep, but it was still the first thing I thought about when I woke up. Immediately stripped naked and checked myself in the bathroom mirror. Shman, are you trying to shit a log or a whole forest? I gotta take a piss. My roommate Robert was pounding on the door. Ran my fingers over my chest for the 100th time. A giant cross-shaped scar on my right pec. The undulating lines wandered haphazardly, grotesquely, like it hadn't been a. Stared at him. Have you seen this before? I asked. Dude, are you drunk? I'm not looking at your, he started, backpedaling. I grabbed a towel and wrapped it around my waist. Not that, you idiot. This scar. What happened to me? Yeah, you got in a fight with a mugger when you were in high school. You said he cut you up pretty bad, but you chased him off. Hey, I never told you that, I said. That never happened. Hey, you're being crazy, man. Just let me use the bathroom. Okay. Robert pushed past me and closed the door. I went straight to my computer and logged onto Facebook. I had that thing set up since my freshman year of high school. There had to be some pictures which proved, man, I looked like a little shitbag. Then, okay, here we go. Senior ditch day, we all went down to a river and hung out. I was in my swimsuit and the grotesque scar was on my chest. The ones on my stomach and forearm were there too. I flipped back a few more years and saw it disappear during my sophomore year. From the photos, it looked like whatever happened was in the first semester of my junior year. When I thought about that time in my life, there was only one memory which burned so brightly as to cast shadows on the rest. I narrowed down the range of dates, and there was no mistaking it. I found a photo of myself running shirtless with the team the week before, no scars. The week after, I wasn't present at the game. Then after that, I was covered in bandages. But that hadn't happened. I remember we started off the season 4-0, and I played in every game. Somehow, there was something about that night which was changing my past. I hadn't meant to hurt her. There was a party to celebrate our homecoming victory game, and everyone was having a little too much to drink. I thought Jessica wanted it. She certainly seemed like she did. There's no way I could have known how she would react the next morning, or what she would do herself the next month when she found out she was pregnant. It's not my fault Jessica is dead. Life goes on, you know? Ancient history. And if somehow these scars appearing on my body were related to that night, and I had to carry them as penance the rest of my life, then I could accept that. If that had been all there was, I wouldn't have been so scared or angry. But the scars this morning were more deliberate. Etched into the back of my hand are the words, "How many cuts will it take before I see you again?" Maybe some wounds cut too deep to ever be left in the past. Wonder how many more it will take before she's satisfied, or whether I'll even survive her search for peace.